Hi, everybody. I'm just adjusting what I'm seeing. Yeah. Oh my God. Anyway, I'm sorry I didn't comb my hair, Carol, because the first question I'm going to try to answer is from you. So I have to look. I'm trying to look my best here, which is interesting. Carol Martin from Nashville asked me a question that's a bit like how long and how high is the universe? But it's not. It's what is grace? It's a phenomenal question. It is tremendous. And I had to think a little bit about this one because, from my perspective, grace has a lot to do with love and compassion. And in our world, normally the relationship that we have with love and compassion has to do with feeling, sense orientation, but also relates to um, dilemmas in our life, various types of things. So, how I tried to answer this a little bit anyway is related uh, to love itself. From my perspective, grace is an act of love internally. Um, so, the preamble before that, you could say that all of the energy inside of you that is loving in nature is universal in nature, divine in nature, spiritual in nature. And the interaction that we have with this is really kind of difficult for us to understand. We have wishes, wants, and desires, and we engage with life all the time, and we hope for other people, and others become very important to us, family and all the rest of it, friends. And we become sensitive to these particular things. And of course, we create defenses against an overwhelming relationship with those feelings and senses. And if we do a little bit of that, we're kind of okay. If we do a lot of it, we're not okay that much because we end up not understanding our relationship with the tremendous emotion that floods our personality system. So here's a try. Those higher states are constantly engaging with us in a loving way. I don't care what kind of personality you have. I don't care what your objectives are, whether they be negative from some people's point of view or positive. The, they tend to show you what your intentions are. And if they align with intentions that are important to you, then that importance that you have is valued by you. The personalization that's involved with this is stimulated by that love that is there, and every act, physically, emotionally, mentally, has it, or spiritually has it, so that you can actually begin to see your relationship with you. You're kind of a form or an object. I hate to use that word because we use it in so many insensitive ways. But you are a form dwelling on these planes. And that energy, or spiritual energy, or divine love, or whatever you want to call it, is in you to enable you to begin to move in a direction that relates to you knowing that you're engaged in higher states. Now, it doesn't have that judgment, even though we've been trained and taught that that judgment is really strong in higher states about us in lower states who always mess up. according to the rules of a culture, whatever that may be. Whatever they may be, doesn't matter. And in fact, the objective of this is to defend the culture and also to enable us to live in the culture and engage with other people and ourselves in a manner that is perhaps more gentle than we're able to, based on how we've been trained and supported to act out or relate to a life that is considerably called ours. We all have personalities, and they're slightly different, sometimes hugely different. That higher level of love engages with enabling you to be how you think you need to be so you can see how you are. That's an act of grace. That's an act of love. It doesn't do that so you can hurt. It doesn't do that so you can beat yourself up for being this way or that way. It doesn't do that to elevate you as a personality because you get away with everything in the world. It doesn't do that for that reason. It doesn't do that to enable you personally to be superior or inferior with respect to others. It's not a competitive thing. I was going to use one word, flow. It's a flow that enables you to learn, to perceive. Now, we're not taught this. This is really difficult for us. But this is throughout all of the systems, philosophical as well as religious. All of these systems indicate that this is a healthy way to be in some kind of idealized form. In other words, if you can understand everyone and relate to everyone, you can understand what compassion is. Relationship with others might be like. However, we don't understand very well. We have learned to survive in our world. That is an act of grace as well, as strange as it might sound. So I'm really saying the personality that you have, no matter what it is the one that you've chosen with respect to needs that might have been apparent in a second or a moment for you to survive circumstances that were devaluing you or seemingly supporting an uplifting aspect of you so that your parental background could help you in some way according to them. But it's not only the parents that cause you to engage. It's how we see what is there available for us to see. Our awareness is not our strongest suit. Our survival techniques, whatever they may be, doesn't matter, might be our strongest suit. But they're not very helpful sometimes. And they're exceedingly helpful at others. This is very complicated. But from my perspective, rest assured that that energy coming in, called grace or love, is there to help you to begin to learn with it and acquire an awareness that is not judgmental. That's a relationship with loving, either of yourself or others. To have a very deep understanding of that will also include a recognition or a perception that relates to others and their inability to do anything other than what they're doing. That doesn't negate them. There is a perception that goes along with this that relates to you beginning to perceive the chakras and the energy that is moving through them and the strong vulnerability that they have within them if they do not get exactly how they were trained to get the kind of energy that would support them to remain the same as they have been trained to do so. The grace and love of that higher state or higher states goes slow enough and careful enough and gentle enough to allow us to slowly make sense of something, because we have various idealistic ways of seeing things that none of us can measure up to. Idealism is interesting as a philosophical concept, but once you start believing that you're engaging somehow idealistically in your life and are superior or inferior, you can have inferior idealism as well. You are more inferior than anybody else. Then you search to find some way to survive in that, and that's pretty scary. As well as the most wondrousness of you in the pictures that you show yourself, your images that you portray. These are not negative at all, but they are there, and we are not yet as conscious of them, nor might we want to be, because somehow that implies a kind of negativity if we can't live up to what we believe the idealized aspirations might be. That's why spiritual growth is so slow. Because more energy coming in makes you more conscious of that which is you, and automatically you divine, personalized divination, you divine that there's something wrong with you, and there is not. You can see why the need at these levels, physical, emotional, and mental levels, and personalized levels, there must be a very slow process involved with the broadening of our understanding, because we could reflexively believe we're either superior or inferior, or not understand that the most important thing in our relationship, which cuts into another question, is to find a balance in our understanding. And this one is tough, and we need help or grace, help to understand our relationship with finding that balance. We tend not to look for and engage with balances. We look for those things that need to be a certain way. Otherwise, there is something wrong or right. Middle ground is huge. Less attention is paid to the middle ground than to the edges. Tremendous amounts of edges because of our relationship with our tremendous levels of vulnerability. Vulnerability itself is an act of grace. I hate when I say that. But nonetheless, it's not a matter of hate, it's a matter of concern. Vulnerability isn't always because something is wrong. It's an opportunity, it's an empty spot, and we're not used to empty places. It's a quiet spot where you can actually allow yourself to ask questions about how you can be helpful to yourself. How you can take on something that would be personally more comfortable in your life. We're used to, as we leave our teenage and our 20 years, our education's behind us, these concepts. It's not behind us. God, we have more education between the years of 29 to 90 than we have between 0 and 19 or 20 or 29. But we somehow think that we know everything at whatever age we're at. And that is, if we can understand that, may not be as true as we believe. Given if we had an age of 180, we could never learn enough to understand everything that lies within us, never mind what's external. So we're looking for, still on that idea, Carol, ideas that might be helpful in given situations, where strange situations turn into something positive as opposed to what we thought it might be turning into. And we call these things acts of grace. And I'm glad we have that word that we can banter around, because these things happen. Happenstances, synchronicity that is really positive, really constructive, that we learn from. And perhaps we can continue to learn from if we can only see them all. It's a weird thing, this business of life. There is a life energy everywhere. If you're looking at it from a philosophical point of view or theosophical point of view, the study of that which is beyond here, which is in theories about higher states, you can look at it from many different levels. All religious backgrounds and philosophical backgrounds talk about these things all the time. Even psychology, the superconscious levels and the engagement with flow, and that has been going on forever. The idea of being able to understand something through an experience or a theory is very interesting. I was listening to a lecturer the other night who was talking as sincere as he possibly could about the importance of theory versus experience in relationship to superconscious engagement. I found it fascinating. There was a tendency to put down the mystical side of things because the occult, or that which is not theorized clearly yet, is vast from his point of view. And I just find that very strange. If you have an experience of a single aspect of grace, or something shifts in you, and you look at it and say, my goodness, how come I didn't do life this way when I normally do it that way? And something, because of that shift, occurs that you never noticed before, and it's comfortable for you, and it makes some kind of sense for you. The chances of you doing something similar to that particular thing again is greater, because the impact of that act of grace on you is a teaching impact. It's personalized, granted, it's subjective, yes, sure, but it's also there, and you experienced it, and you value it. The only difficult may be you may not have a place for it in your mind. You may think it's weird, you may think it's this or that or that. It just doesn't matter. But you may move towards negating something because you experienced it, believing that it may not have really been the way you thought it was. Now, this is an intellectual orientation. It's fine. You have a right to do that. It's a good thing to do. But it's not a good thing to do to throw away the experience. If you throw away the experience, then your focus is on throwaway. Remember, the act of love with that energy will focus on whatever you want it to focus on. And you will be the one who will be pushing you away from a reality that is there, as opposed to a reality that aligns with culture or with the people that you relate to currently. Either way is fine. An act of grace would be if you had another experience similar to that in some other place that was yours. Then you could say, wow, I wonder if that's different. If you learn how to ask questions as opposed to make decisions about what you perceive and understand, then you leave yourself open to a broader understanding. If you make decisions about what should be or shouldn't be, if you like that word, it's a word, then which side of the fence do you argue for? You being in alignment with a cultural-based background that is very stratified and narrow, or a little broader. Well, here's the question. Am I already narrow in my relationship with my understanding? If the question is yes, then if the answer is yes, then you know it will be a little bit more narrow. If it's broader, then it will be a little bit more broad. If it's overly broad, you'll be thinking anything and everything is an act of grace. Actually, you're probably closer to the truth. In my opinion, life is an act of grace. Because basically the form that you're in is developing in a manner that relates directly to, or can relate directly to, a deepening of an interaction with higher states. And ultimately, that's where we're all going. And it won't be a matter of who's more important or less important, because that is not related to a higher state. That's related to these states. All who engage with higher states are important because they're helpers. They engage with others knowingly or unknowingly and are of service to others, meaning enabling others to link up slightly more than they could before, even if they don't know it, because energy is moving through that helper to be of service to others, whether they know it or they don't know it. It's a relationship with frequency. Closer you engage with an understanding that might be helpful in broadening out your recognition, often called wisdom, of things that occur in everyone rather than only in you, rather than only in them, the closer you get to understanding how higher states see these states. They perceive these states as they are. They don't consider how you're functioning as much as we consider others and how they're functioning, and perhaps ourselves too. They consider how the individual is able to use frequency for the purpose of helping others, and also how that frequency engages and modifies or intensifies the energy that's already trained to do this or that in life. You can see how broad this one is. That's why I said it's like, what's the universe like? I think it's a great question. The links between these states and higher states is an act of love. Often people talk about an act of initiation, meaning a shifting of all the structures within you, movement from where you are to another, allowance of possibility broader than the ones you currently allow yourself to have. Initiation is energy moving into you for a purpose of being helpful in that particular kind of movement. It not only shows you what's going on, but it allows you to have a space within your mind, a space within your emotion, which is uncomfortable, often called vulnerability. And then sometimes helps you to have the wisdom to make room for a little bit of vulnerability, even though it is really difficult to handle. There's a raw sensation that got to your stomach, can up into your chest, into your throat, especially with these three centers. And you can find yourself naturally reflexing into a state related to your defensive structures. This is called recycling. Recycling. You do not have to stay in those places for as many years as it took to train them so you could survive. But my God, it feels as if you've been in them for as many years when they occur. That's preparation, and that is also not only preparation, but an indication that there is something going on within that is not negating you, but helping you to be available for an increase in flow. It often feels that way. And it always, I shouldn't say always, often stimulates a sense of need to survive, which is vital, as well as a sense of something is off. And you go through many of these cycles preparing you for huger, very large influences of flow that enable you, through an act of love, act of grace, to be receptive and just watch that flow, as opposed to thinking it came from you, because it really did not. It came through that form that is here, engaging with these planes, for these planes, as an act of love, as an act of grace. It is a wondrous thing. And there are methods to do this. You can do it. Actually, it can occur quite physically. The Buddhists are quite clear on this one. It can occur very physically. It can occur quite emotionally. Shifting into that emotion, into a state where you can actually see it and watch it through a mental state. It's called a mental emotional state at a higher level than the intellect. And thirdly, an engagement with a mind that is not going to be put off by being silenced. because it knows that that silence is related to love, related to a divine level of engagement at its probable lowest level where it can be handled by a human being. Get me some water, please. Excuse me. Throat center's off. Sorry. These higher states would move to be as helpful as possible. Emphasis on as possible as an act of grace. We can only handle certain, thank you so much, certain levels of flow. And when we do handle just a little bit more than we're normally used to, we have an almost reflexive response to the things that help us to grow. It's fascinating. You can watch your meditation slow down. You stop reading material. I'm not always sure that's a bad thing, but anyway, it could be. Your emotions get stronger. Your physical body can be stiff because energy flows through it as well. In different and with respect to different frequencies that can flow through each and every one of those forms that make up the personality as a whole, as a being. I find this very fascinating, but you can see the level of vulnerability that might occur. And just a thought, which you don't have to agree with, but you might, it's just a thought. Sometimes vulnerability is focused on rather than energy. And if you can't perceive energy, then that would be normal. If you can perceive energy, it would still be normal, because the bulk of your focus is here, trying to survive. And your vulnerabilities are stimulated, and you are automatically trying to figure out just what that might be that's making you feel vulnerable. And you can find things. That's the easy part. But they may not be as real as you believe. Watch your solar plexus. It'll tell you right away. It'll be moving up towards the chest, because you're preparing to link up those three lower centers upward and into that throat center, so that energies can come in. Remember, the throat center is the friend of the brow. They can come in and flow through those centers a little better. And a real trick is to be aware above your head and behind you. Consciously use mental stuff, or if your reflexes are there, emotional, use them. Try and move them behind you, above you. And talk to that energy. Yeah, don't let anybody else hear you. Say, easy, easy. This is hard for me. Take it easy, real gentle. You're basically talking to you, and see if that energy softens. It's your reflex also that can soften, because the reflex, remember, is still increased because that's where your focus is. Love goes right there. and does focus on the things that you focus on. Nothing is negative in that. You are learning where you go. And what is that? And you're not a bad person. You're learning about the being of you. That's an act of grace. Hugely engaged with another state, linking to another state. Also, engaging with the states that you're in already. These are really, perhaps, concepts a little bit more difficult to understand in the long run. But your experience is right there. All the ideas around grace and love, I don't have any trouble with those things. You know, the idea of grace and love and compassion is exceedingly complex. These constructs are often looked at. This is a definition of love. This is a definition of, compassion. This is a definition of grace, and that's it. That's it. No. If it's real compassion, real grace, real love, huge, it's not limited by small definitions. And this is one of the things that is very difficult for us to understand. As a human being, we have terribly difficult times with our sense of relationship, our sense of feeling, our sense of loving, kindness. Oh, these are huge. We don't have trouble when it's easier for us, but when it's hard for us, it's really hard. I hope that helps a little bit, Carol. I wrote some stuff down here, but I think I covered most of it. But nonetheless, a little bit important in the process of trying to make sense of stuff. Every time you come up with an answer about these huger questions, let them sit for a while and then ruminate again. Good thing to take in the meditation. Good thing to engage with. A good thing to wrap your emotion around, your mind around, your body around. You know, do it physically. You can put your hands around yourself and try to simulate loving. That sounds terrible to say it like that, but do what you can. Emotionally, you'll find emotion is there a bit. It's okay. Do it with emotion. Care. Try to care for you. And then do the same thing with your mind. Mind is tricky, but boy, it's really helpful. Think about loving, and then use your mind and wrap it around your whole body. If you can feel your emotion, wrap it around your emotion as well. And keep that there. And if you can be aware, watch how your physical body responds. How you engage when you meditate. How you engage when you talk to people. Take a good look. Go slow with these things. Because slowness causes you to maintain something. Quickness makes up another definition. I did that. Doing it once is really good, a good method of getting away from it Do it as many times as possible. Not for anybody else. Don't do it for me. Don't do it for anybody else. Do it for you. Do it for you. That's when it's valuable. So you can learn. So you can understand. So you can understand more than one thing. One way to do it. One way to see it. Understand that tremendous level of loving that occurs in anything you do so you can see what you do. That is so valuable. And nobody gets it perfectly. Nobody. If you think you do, you've missed a pile. And that's not negative. Your awareness is just not there. You've either lifted yourself up and become superior because you can do spiritual actions, or you look like you're spiritual. I'm being honest about it. Or you can put yourself down. I can never be spiritual. That is not attempting to love. But that love will come in so that you can see it. Go slow with seeing it. Be kind to it. Talk to it. Talk to you. Have good, wonderful, warm conversations. It's important. Very valuable. I have a few questions. I'm not sure I have time to go through them all. I was just trying to think if I had something. Could you just bear with me for a second here? Here's one that's a little bit smaller. I can make it bigger probably, but here's the question from Deborah Olshansky. I'm sorry, Deborah. I have terrible times with everybody's names. It seems that finding time to meditate each day has become necessary for survival, almost like a need for oxygen or water. Is that just my personal perception, or is it actually connected to something energetic? And I seem to find that on busy days, 10 minutes is infinitely better than no minutes. Is there truth in that, or am I just justifying or rationalizing? I could honestly say that if you can find 10 minutes on a busy day, it helps you to open the defenses that are pressuring you to get what you need to get done. Helps you to open, and you start realizing you don't have to put as much intensity in to getting something done as you thought you did. That I find very fascinating, because I used to think that you had to really be intense to get stuff done. Some of us do intensity fairly easily. But the meditation is very, very valuable. It's like trying to stretch and then de-stretch. You stretch with life and then you let it soften a bit. But remember, when you're softening in meditation, you're also letting in energy past your defensive system. And remember what I was talking about a few minutes ago with Carol. That love, that higher level engagement of love, will go where you focus. So it will help you to open more and be less defensive in places where you'll want to be more defensive. That means you're going to be vulnerable to some degree. It's how it tends to work. And another person's question was related to vulnerability, and is it important to be vulnerable. It's vulnerable with a capital V. A little bit different than vulnerability that needs to be defended against and help you have to survive. It's a vulnerability which allows you to think in it, notice you in it, understand the internal structure of you is showing you something that you're not used to. That's love in action. It doesn't mean you have to be really vulnerable to grow. It's not what I'm talking about. Vulnerability is an opening to perceiving and engaging with something beyond what you normally can perceive and engage with. How's that one? Think about that. Let me know what you think about that one. But it's not just your personal perception. It's kind of in the cycle of movement beyond where you were before. The cycle is always there. You move beyond where you were before to prepare you for movement beyond where you were before. For movement prepares you for movement beyond where you were before. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these things in a lifetime, when you start to notice them when they're starting again. I'd like to say it makes it a heck of a lot easier. In a kind of a way it does. But in a kind of a way it's not easier very much. It's you noticing you're shifting somewhere. And my version of shifting is the links between these states and higher states are in a movement towards becoming slightly different, stronger. Therefore, you're preparing to have more openness towards you, more understanding, more compassion, more kindness, from a place that's not as kind, not as compassionate, and not as willing to understand. It's reflexive. It's survival-based. It's based on, I need to be able to get through this kind of thing. This is normal for all of us. And I don't see negativity in that. I see discomfort. It's true. But meditation really helps. Both ways. Helps to soften that intensity that is natural and normal under a circumstance that relates to feeling uncomfortable internally. As well, it's really helpful in opening so you can learn and broaden out your understanding of how you are as a being of consciousness, as opposed to being superior, inferior, more right, more wrong, and being able to cultivate in the middle to see better, but you will still go through cycles of growing physically, emotionally, and mentally. It's all part of these planes. To broaden out, for example, so that, let's do it in terms of Zephyroth or chakras. Energy can come into these systems, through those systems, into these planes, and work together eventually. And at some ideal point, as if you only had one. All of those 7 plus 3 become one. This is a little farther than our understanding will likely wish us to go into, because I think we have an easier time thinking that we can do that than actually doing it. But maybe it might be important to understand that the whole system is related to a very broad-based process. So as you grow, you help others the best you can, realizing that the language of you changes as you grow. You see slightly different. You engage slightly differently, although basically you're engaging the way you did before. But you're seeing slightly different than you could before. That, remember, is heard by others in their language portfolio. Not yours. Not yours at all. So they will understand that you are not clear to them. Even though in your mind, in your heart, in your experience, you are so clear. Do what you can. Talk to yourself the same way. It's of great value. The kindness that you can exhibit with respect to yourself is related to compassion, loving, concept of grace that Carol was asking about. And it's as if it is even, like leaven, even a related movement towards balance. There is a consistency in that movement. If it is in and through you, it will use the language of you, the experience of you, the engagement that you have with the willingness to go beyond where you are. And that is really, for us, truly a language akin to some form of idealization when we're looking at it from the ground up. Go slow. Don't be afraid to see. Judging is not a reality that's helpful. When you'll see for sure that you're imperfect, that will push you away from meditation. No one likes to see that they're imperfect. Although, generally speaking, none of us are perfect. That's so easy to say, generally speaking. But don't for a second stop meditating. Don't for a second, Carol, stop looking for grace. It's there all the time. Interpretation is very difficult for us. I wish everybody a really good night. Oh, by the way, including